The other side of this grey line on Presidency.
As opposed to what am I wanting to say? No, this is what I believe.
Just waiting for her to go by.
She organised this marvellous thing in a oil tank.
Well, I didn't realise it then,
So the trouble is, big black rainbows are 10 pennies.
But that white space in between. MP.
I didn't put the words MP. Should I?
Yeah. You fought so hard to get there.
Yeah, if you have the badge, put it on.
One offside down, other parts of the country are
We know what we're doing in these.
All the attractive people to the front. No, not you.
Yeah. children living with HIV in our community-based programme. Jeremy's generosity was sensed by us all.
That desire to make a difference really drives him. It's never been about him. It's always been about what he can do to help others.
The work he's done will save the lives of countless babies, and other families will not have to go through the kind of pain that we did.
People often underestimate Jeremy because he comes across as being such a polite and generous and nice person, and he is. But I remember hearing him warning the EU not to mistake British politeness for British weakness, and I thought that just about sums him up.
I was pessimistic about the London Olympics. I thought, we could mess this up. I remember talking to Jeremy in the build-up. He said, no, we're a great country. We can do this if we have the right mindset. The delivery was outstanding. It also had this element of fun. I know that Jeremy was very involved in getting that balance right.
He believes in Britain as a force for good in the world. He's shown strong values at the FCO and consistently good judgment.
Negotiate, toughing it out when things get really difficult, keeping going, having a vision. Those are the skills that we need in a Prime Minister.
He's a unifier. He's somebody who can reach out to different groups of people.
My dad always taught me that politics should be about making a difference in ordinary people's lives. And Jeremy made a huge difference to our lives. He gave us hope. And that for me was the main thing, that he gave us hope in some very, very dark days.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jeremy Hunt.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a bit echoey in here, so I will try and speak not too fast. And thank you to the party for organising this event in Essex. I'm delighted to be here. As you know, my normal campaign slogan is "Has to be Hunt," but I'm wondering here if it should be, in Essex, "The only way is Jezza." I can do better. I've been touring the country with Boris, and I can see there's a few "Has to be Hunt" stickers and a few "Back Boris" stickers around. And I remember Bruce Forsyth once said, "Remember, only half the audience are ever going to like you. Don't worry about the other half, the bastards." But that is not us in the Conservative Party, because after this leadership election, we are going to unite, we're going to come together, because that is what the country needs, isn't it? So I am standing here because I want to tell you what I want to change as our Prime Minister. And you can't do everything, and I have 4 priorities, and I'm going to tell you those 4 priorities, but we can't do any of them until we deliver Brexit. And the central question on all of our minds is, how do we leave the European Union as quickly and as cleanly as possible? And when it comes to no deal by the 31st of October, there isn't a huge difference between me and Boris. We both prefer a deal. We're both willing to leave without a deal, if that's the only way to leave. We both have the risk of Parliament blocking no deal, as it did in March, and that's why I've been a little bit less specific about my language, but we're both willing to do it. But the quickest way to leave, the safest way to leave, given the parliamentary arithmetic that we have, is to send to Brussels a Prime Minister who can negotiate a deal that can actually get through Parliament. And I am the person to do that. And the reason I say that is something that may even have filtered through to Essex about me. If I become the next Prime Minister, I'll be the first Prime Minister we've ever had who has been an entrepreneur. There we are. Someone's been paying attention. And she's wearing a "Has to be Hunt" sticker. Fantastic, even better. And just out of interest, how many people here have set up their own business? Just put up your hands. I think just look around. That is probably one of the highest numbers of hands I've had. And that says so much about our Conservative Party. We are the doers, the risk takers, the wealth creators, people who create jobs for other people, and we can be so proud of that. And of course, entrepreneurs, every day of their lives, they negotiate. They negotiate with suppliers, with customers, they negotiate on their leases, and that is what I'm going to do to get us out of the European Union. And when I do, we've got those 4 priorities, and I'm going to tell you the very first, which is about business. I want to fire up our economy. I want us to be the most pro-growth, pro-enterprise, pro-business, greenest, high-tech economy in the whole of Europe. We've got, in this country, the best universities in the world. You've got one of them just up the road in Cambridge. I was there this afternoon. We've got more technology entrepreneurs, more medicines being developed, many of them in the east of England. You put all that together, and we could be the world's next Silicon Valley. And why does that matter? Because in 10 years' time, thank goodness, we are not going to be talking about Brexit. We are going to be talking about driverless cars and Amazon deliveries coming by drone and artificial intelligence and nanotechnology and robotics. And if we can be the next Silicon Valley, we can set our country up for the future. And I'm going to take a giant step towards that by the biggest set of business tax cuts we've ever had in this country, cutting corporation tax to just 12.5%, the same levels they have in Ireland, taking 90% of high street shops out of business rates. When I went down the streets of Colchester with Vicky, it was Chelmsford with Vicky, Canvey Island and Colchester, what we hear is lots of shops in distress about the lack of footfall caused by the internet. We want to help them take those business tax cuts, fire up our economy, set our country up for the future. Number 1. Number 2, I'm the Foreign Secretary who wants our country to walk tall in the world. And didn't our Royal Navy do brilliantly this week protecting British shipping in the Gulf? I said I want to put more money into our armed forces, and that's because the world is becoming a more dangerous place. But there's another reason. On the point of Brexit, I want to send a signal of confidence to the world about Britain, that special country that has always done so much more than probably any other country apart from the United States to stand up for democratic values and for the security you need to underpin them. And I want, at this moment when so many people are looking at us and wondering about what our role is going to be after Brexit, I want them to know that Britain is here, Britain is back, Britain's voice is strong in the world, and Britain stands up for our values. Number 3, I'll be the first Prime Minister who's been responsible for our NHS. And I think we Conservatives always need to have a social mission and not just an economic mission. People know we start businesses, they know we can create wealth, but they don't always know about our compassionate values. And I want our social mission to be education. Still today, after all the brilliant reforms that Michael Gove and others did, we still have a quarter of our primary school leavers who can't read properly. And we are the party that wants to put a ladder in front of every single young person when they start out on their life. And the first rung on that ladder has to be able to read. And I want us to be the Conservative government that abolishes the scourge of illiteracy in our society and shows the world that we are the party of opportunity for absolutely everyone in our society. And that's what I'm going to do as Prime Minister. And then my final promise It's a political one, actually, to all of us friends in the Conservative Party. I promise you that I will not take us into a general election until we have got more young people voting Conservative. We can't be the party of aspiration if the most aspirational people in our country aren't supporting us. And I've got a package of policies for young people. We can talk about them perhaps in the Q&A. But there's a particular reason why we have to win over young people. The reason that Corbyn gave us that shock at the last election was that he got young people voting Labour on a series of fake and bogus promises. We must not let that happen again, because with Jeremy Corbyn, we have the most dangerous, ruthless, anti-Western, anti-British, anti-Semitic Labour Party that we have ever had in our history. So, at this crucial moment, get it wrong, and we will have no Conservative government, no Brexit, no Conservative Party even. Get it right, and we will deliver Brexit, unite our party, unleash the potential of our extraordinary country, and send Corbyn packing. And that's what I'm going to do. Thank you very much.
A friend of mine said to me last night, we've heard all their answers to all the different political questions, but I want to know more about them as people. So we're going to do something a bit different over the next 10 minutes. I want to try and...
personal questions.
I want to try and explore character and experience rather than political questions, because I'm sure we'll get plenty of those from the audience. If you were writing a letter to your 16-year-old self, what would it say?
Well, these are great questions, actually. What I would say is, the sky's the limit. This is what my dad always said to me. My dad was a huge influence in my life. He was a naval officer, gave me a fantastic upbringing. But his rule in our family was the two words that were never allowed were, I can't. He said, you can do anything. And every time I came home and I said, I don't think I can get a good mark in this A-level, or I don't think I can learn this sport, or I don't think I can set up my own business, he would always say, you can, and I'm not having you saying you can't do anything, because you can. And in the Navy, you weren't allowed to declare a political allegiance, but he was always a Conservative, because that is our philosophy as Conservatives, that we can reach for the stars as a country. And I would say that it's different to the American dream. The American dream is a wonderful thing, and I absolutely love it. And we have that ambition to reach for the stars, but there is a decency and a belief in staying true to your values, and an understanding of the power of what we can do as a country, which I think was in many ways forged in the Second World War, when we stood alone together as a country, that makes the British dream a slightly different one. So I think what I would say is, you have to go for it, and when things go wrong, you have to learn and you have to try again. And my business, it was the first one failed. That was exporting marmalade to Japan. I missed the marmalade boom, alas. The second one, that was tourist maps, that also failed. I had a third one that failed, and it was the fourth one that took off. And if there was one thing I want to change in the culture of our country compared to America's, it is that they respect people more when they've had a business that fails, because they say, you've learnt from it, I'm going to back you. Sometimes in this country, the banks run a mile from anyone who's had a setback, and I think we should change that.
People... People always imagine politicians to be extrovert, very confident, but there are lots of politicians who are actually quite shy and introverted. We have some of them here today. Mark Francois, I see, is in the building. Vicky Ford, dare I say. Do you ever suffer from imposter syndrome?
No, I don't think I do. But, you know, I've been brought up with a certain sense of British politeness. Of course, there are moments when you think, you know, I wonder if I can do this. But in terms of this specific job, I think you have to remember the incredible things that our country has done in our history. And, you know, as I mentioned this to you this morning, Ian, but, you know, the D-Day commemorations a month ago, and I was standing between President Trump and Angela Merkel and Theresa May, and you think about the bravery of those men on those D-Day landings. And really, of course, Brexit is a big challenge, but we do have to have a sense of perspective. Our country has faced much, much bigger challenges, not just then, but you know, in the 1980s when we had the miners' strike and all the huge upheavals then. You know, even 10 years ago when we had that huge financial recession. We are a country that has faced challenges, and I think we have to just remember that incredible grit that we have. And I think that should give confidence to anyone doing the job that I want to do.
What is the main thing you've learned from your wife?
Forgiveness. Have you ever got the nationality of your husband wrong? She's amazing. She's got a fantastic... My wife worked at Warwick University, and Warwick University were a customer of my company, the company I set up. And I was a backbench MP, and I was still running the company, and she came along to a customer event, and I allow business to mix with pleasure and ask for a phone number. And when we went out, she had absolutely no idea that I was an MP. I think she thought I was a GP, actually. And I think she'd be the first to say she knew absolutely nothing about British politics. And she grounds me, and she looks after our 3 young kids. And she's got the most fantastic sense of humour. And when I had that famous moment when I got her nationality wrong, the terrible thing about it was that because of the time difference, I was in China when it happened, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning here. So I had to wait until she woke up, and I was terrified she was going to hear it on the news before she heard it from me. But when I finally got through to her, she said, "Konnichiwa, darling." That's the Japanese word for hello, so she's got a great sense of humour.
What makes you angry? Because you're quite a placid individual, aren't you?
I get angry when I don't do my best. I think that there are things you can control and things you can't control. But when I haven't done something as well as I want to, I'm a perfectionist. And
do you want to give us an example?
Probably people here will know that when I was Health Secretary, I had a very bitter year-long dispute with the junior doctors. I got my way. I didn't blink, and I think that because of that and a whole series of reforms, I made the NHS safer. But I wish I hadn't had to go into that battle with junior doctors. They are very, very hard-working people. They're the future of the NHS, and I wish I'd found a way to get my message across to them better. And in truth, they were getting all their news from Facebook. And I found it very, very hard to get the message across on Facebook. And that's one thing we've got to get right as a party, getting our message out on social media. So that would be the thing I learned.
What's been the best moment of your life?
The best moment of my life? When well, look, marriage, children, all that, just in case my wife's watching now. That was it. But the second best moment, I was a prospective parliamentary candidate for a very marginal seat, a Conservative seat, but our majority was just 861. It was against the Liberal Democrats, and they are very vicious opponents, as I'm sure a number of people here know. And when I went into the count in 2005, I had absolutely no idea if I'd won or not. I prepared 2 speeches, one for winning and one for losing. And we were watching the bundles piling up, and that was the only way we were going to be able to tell whether I'd won or not. And there was a point when we could see that my bundles were higher than my opponents. And my father was there, and he had a tear in his eye, and it brought one to mine as well.
I was going to ask what makes you cry, but I won't now. Tomorrow, we have the Wimbledon men's final, we have the Cricket World Cup final, we have the British Grand Prix, and women's netball. Which one will you be watching?
You specialise in questions that are going to lose me votes. Look, I wish England every success, and I hope they will forgive me if I watch the tennis, because I'm a huge Federer fan.
Right, over to you. Let's get some questions from the floor. You put your hand up first, sir, so we'll have you, and then over there. Wait for them. Where's the microphones? And if you can get the microphone to the chap there now.
Andrew Parker-Jervis from Saffron Walden. Are you capable of handling the nuclear deterrent?
Well, Andrew, I'm sure the answer is yes. It's a huge responsibility, though. My dad was actually in the Navy, was responsible for it for a while, for the operational side of it. And the reason I hesitate in my answer is only that to be responsible for the nuclear deterrent and a believer in the deterrence philosophy, which I am, you have to be someone who's prepared to use it, because otherwise it's not a deterrent. And that is a very big thing, and you have to look into your soul and say, are you prepared to do that? Because you have to protect your country. So I hope the answer to that question is yes. Of course, you and many others will make that judgment when you cast your votes.
Because that is a very important distinction between, hopefully, you or Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn, because he's made it very clear that he's not actually quite said it, but I don't think anybody believes that he would, which therefore renders the whole nuclear deterrent useless, doesn't it? So people have got to be confident that you would.
I think he's actually said he wouldn't use it. I think he has. And that's why this country is not safe with him.
Okay. Right. Gentleman there, and then the lady there.
Hi, Jeremy. Rory from London. Just wondering if you could clarify on your comments that you made comparing veterans and the IRA, whether they should be treated the same or whether there should be some sort of difference between the two.
Sure. It is an absolute outrage that we are dragging people through the courts nearly 40 years after Bloody Sunday. There is absolutely no equivalence between our brave troops on the front line and IRA terrorists. We have to resolve this issue in a way that protects the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, which is one of the huge achievements of the last 30 years, started by John Major and then, to his credit, concluded by Tony Blair. So we have to find a way through this, and I've committed that I will.
Great. Lady there, followed by gentleman there.
I'm from Norfolk, a manufacturing company, and there's something you said in one of your earlier hustings that I've struggled to make sense of. So you said that this company had a 4% margin, but that a 10% tariff would therefore wipe them out. And I can't make sense of that statement, because if it's a 4% gross profit on their goods, then a 10% tariff, that would not mean they're wiped out. If you're talking about a 4% net profit, again, that's only on the net profit of the business. So I just need to understand, you've said entrepreneur,
Sure.
that you're the entrepreneur, and I need to know that you know about manufacturing companies.
Rather than having a maths test, shall I tell you the numbers? It was a steel business in Kidderminster that I visited, and they make steel wheels, and they have a 40 million turnover, 1.5 million profit, and they said those profits would be wiped out by 11% tariffs on their steel products because it would make them uncompetitive. Now that's not me that said that, that was what the managing director of this factory said to me. So I said to him, I'm a Democrat, we are a democracy, we may have to deliver no deal. So what would be the best way to help prepare your factory so that you can cope with those tariffs? And it was after talking to him that I put together my package, actually a £20 billion package of support for businesses, farmers, probably the most affected sector, parts of the fishing industry, the fish processing industry, but also businesses up and down the country. That's one of the reasons why I've said I'll proceed with the 12.5% corporation tax, irrespective of whether we have a deal or not, because I think it would help businesses to do that. So all these things are potential obstacles, but I think if we prepare for them and we support businesses, we can get through them.
Right, gentleman there, followed by gentleman at the back there.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt, thank you very much indeed for coming to join us. My name is Roger Buston. I'm a Conservative councillor from Colchester. Given that our country and that our party are both facing what is an existential crisis of the first magnitude in our age, being number one, Corbyn, and number two, Brexit, and the very last thing we need is any further internecine warfare in our party.
Corbyn, right. And then Brexit. Sorry, carry on after.
Is any further internecine warfare in our party, which is the only party that can save Britain and cause it to prosper in the future. And to achieve this, we need all the great talent we can muster from within our ranks to address the above. Could you please confirm that, one, if you are elected as our next leader, you will invite your current opponent and the former leadership challengers to participate at the highest level in your administration, and two, in the obverse to the above, if you're not selected as our next leader, you will willingly, enthusiastically and loyally serve in the administration of the leader?
Thank you. The answer is yes and yes. It's a very important question to ask, because we have to come together, and whichever wing of the party you're on, whether you're on the Brexit wing or the no deal wing, the truth is that we won't deliver any kind of Brexit, and we'll be destroyed as a party unless we come together. And we also have to have the DUP with us, because we need them to get things through Parliament. So I am going to try and do that by putting together a negotiating team that has on the team the DUP, the ERG from our party, Scottish Conservatives, Welsh Conservatives. We have to think about the Union as well. And I will only propose to Brussels a deal that can get through Parliament. And I think it's very important that we do it that way round. And I believe there is a deal to be done there, but we've got to be smart about how we do it.
But one of the things... One of the things which I predict we'll hear from Boris Johnson in a moment, and I've done 9 of these things, so I think I can predict that. One of the things we will hear is he says, well, he's got people from right across the party as part of the 160 MPs that voted for him. The MPs that voted for you were largely from the Remain side.
Well, I've got 1 or 2 people in the audience here, actually, like Will Quince from the Leave side. And look, the truth is that to succeed, whether it's Boris or me, we're going to have to draw on MPs from all camps, from all parts of the party, and we're going to have to bring everyone together. And, you know, what unites us is that we're Democrats. And, you know, when I go around the world as Foreign Secretary, people love this country because we are one of the greatest and oldest democracies on the planet. And they want to know, are you going to pass this test? We know the political establishment didn't want to leave the European Union, and we want to see whether this really is a country where people like me, the politicians, do what people like you, the people, tell us to do. And we're going to show them that, yes, we are.
You say we're all Democrats, but there are 20 or 30 Conservative MPs who don't seem to respect the democratic will either of the people or of Parliament in some ways. They are determined to stop Brexit, are they not? I mean, we've even got two in the Cabinet over the last few days, Philip Hammond and Greg Clark, making quite clear they don't expect to be in a Boris Johnson Cabinet. They're going to try and stop it.
Well, what I say to all my colleagues is do not take no deal off the table, because that weakens our negotiating position and it makes getting a deal much harder. But this is why, because we don't just have Conservatives, but we have people in other parties. They will accept, in my experience, even the most hardline, unreconciled Remainers have accepted leaving the European Union. They just don't want to leave without a deal. And that's why the safest and quickest way to get out of the EU, the way that we can actually do it before October the 31st, is to negotiate a deal that can get through Parliament. And that's why we need to put our effort into doing that.
Right, there's somebody, I can't remember where I went before, somebody over there and then in the front row.
Hi there, Darius from Colchester, welcome. In this part of the world, our roads are gridlocked at rush hour, we have dubious air quality, and our children cannot cycle to school safely. What is the solution?
Thank you. The solution is to completely change the way we approach infrastructure, which in this country has been short-termist for a very long time. And I lived in Japan for a couple of years, and I am frankly rather ashamed that they had their first high-speed rail in Japan in 1964. That was 2 years before I was built, before I was born. I'm a strong build. 2 years before I was born, and we're going to have ours in 2026, which is too long. And I think that we do need to build more houses, but we need to have proper long-term infrastructure plans. I think that every part of our country should have 20-year infrastructure plans where they think properly ahead. They plan these things with the involvement and support of local people. And when it comes to pollution, this is an issue we've got to get ahead of, because our voters care a lot about clean air. And mums and dads who take their kids to school and worry about engines idling. I personally think that the big change we need is to move over to electric cars, and I think that when we next dig up the roads to put in fibre optic broadband, we should also put in electric car charging points so that we can move to pollution-free towns and cities.
Do you think that there are new housing developments springing up all over this part of Essex, and that there isn't the infrastructure to cope with them? And part of the reason why Conservative councillors lost in so many areas of this county in May was because of this. There is a fight back against it. How do you get people on side for these kind of developments?
Well, I am someone who believes, we haven't actually yet, maybe we will in a moment, had a discussion about how we get young people to vote for us. But for many young people, the thing that makes them angry is that it is so much harder for them to get on the housing ladder than it was for us when we were their age. And if you remember, when Margaret Thatcher helped 1.5 million council house tenants get onto the housing ladder with her Right to Buy scheme, she also created a whole new generation of Conservatives in the process. And that's what we need to do with young people. So I do think that we need to build houses, but I would favour even more devolution. I think my constituents are very sensitive about building on the green belt, and I understand because I grew up in that area and I understand how important green spaces are. If you say to people, we're forcing you to accept another 5,000 houses so that people from outside the area can come and live there, no one wants to say yes. If we said to them, we need you to accept a smaller number of houses, you can choose where they go, and it's so that local people, young people, can get a foot on the housing ladder, then actually people have a completely different view. So I think we need to give much more power to local authorities to work out where and how and who, and then I think we'd deal with those objections.
Right, gentleman here, and then the lady over there.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hunt. Philip from South Suffolk. In May, I was campaigning in the local elections in Baber, and a bus went through Great Waldingfield, where I was standing, and a man got on, older, he worked at Homebase, and a younger man got on who worked at Sainsbury's. It was only later that I thought, the younger man is paying national insurance, the older man isn't. Given we have an ageing population in our country, is that something that's sustainable in the future and something which is actually turning the party away from young voters?
Well, this is quite a hornet's nest of a question. So well done for asking it.
And he's got one of your stickers on.
And he's got one of my stickers on. We have to be fair. And being fair means addressing the concerns of younger voters, but many older voters would say that when national insurance was introduced, it was to contribute throughout your working life so that when you retire, you can draw a pension. And so once you've made those contributions, it's fair that you should stop. That has been somewhat undermined by the way successive chancellors have effectively treated national insurance as just another form of income tax, which is actually the way it's treated in the national accounts. But I would say if you want more fairness for young people, I would go much more directly to what I think is an even bigger unfairness than the difficulty of getting on the housing ladder, which is the tuition fee reforms, which I support. They've given us some of the best universities in the world, and I think that's brilliant for our young people to have those great universities. But I cannot justify 6% interest rates on those loans. And I think the risk is that we will destroy a good system because it will lose credibility because it doesn't pass the fairness test. And I don't want to do that. So I think we need to find a way to deal with that issue.
Right. Lady there and then the lady there.
Hello, Mr. Hunt. I'm Pat Mellis. I'm from Broxbourne in Hertfordshire. If the NHS can fully fund a patient with cancer and all its complexities and expense, why can it not fully fund a patient with dementia and its complexities and expense? And when will you ensure parity of treatment and care for all?
Thank you, Pat. When I was Health Secretary, I did a lot of work on dementia, and I think the thing that is particularly vile about dementia is the fact that unlike other illnesses, it actually affects the whole family. It changes the lifestyle of the other half, of the carers, in a profound way. And I agree with you about the unfairness there. And we have to find a way to do that. And there's a short-term thing and a long-term thing. The short-term thing is that the austerity cuts that came in 2010 that I was part of in that cabinet, they were the right thing to do. We put the economy back on its feet. But I think when it comes to the social care system, we can see now with the benefit of hindsight that they went too far. And I think local councils now find it difficult to fund the care of people with dementia to the standards that we as Conservatives would want. And so I do think there is a need to sort that out. But the second thing is we have to recognise that it isn't just dementia, but with an ageing population, all of us are going to need a lot more extensive care in the final few months and years of our life. And we need a society which encourages personal responsibility. And I would like to encourage young people to save towards those end-of-life costs, their social care costs, if you like, when they're young, just in the same way they save for their pension. As painlessly as that, just a little bit extra going in. And I think if we do that, we can start encouraging people to build up a nest egg. And I would do a deal. I would say, if you do the right thing when you're younger, then we will protect your assets so that you never have to lose your house and the things you want to bequeath to your children when you die. And I think that's a fair deal.
Okay. Lady there, and gentleman, no, you asked one this morning. We'll have one there.
Putting the Brexit and policy issues to one side, as Conservative Party members, we have sat and watched our elected MPs arguing amongst themselves and ignore our wishes. How will you unite and restore our party to its rightfully respected place in national and world politics?
Thank you. Well, I answered the question before about how we get that unity on the Brexit issue. So can I answer that question in a more general way? In the 1980s, in our party, we were successful partly because we had Norman Tebbit and Geoffrey Howe, two very different characters sitting around the same cabinet table. In the 1990s, you had Ken Clarke and John Redwood doing the same. And the genius of our party is that we've always had a radical tradition, a Thatcherite tradition, that reminds us that to be a great country, we need to be bold, and a one nation tradition, perhaps exemplified by David Cameron, that reminds us that elections are won on the centre ground and people always need to know that we're compassionate conservatives. You put those two traditions together and it is absolute magic, and that is why we have been an unbeatable electoral force over many hundreds of years. Forget that and we're out. And that is why I think we have to remind everyone of the importance of those traditions and of working together with other people in our party who maybe have a different standpoint, but put together is a very, very powerful combination.
So, which job will you be offering Jacob Rees-Mogg?
Well, I think Jacob is actually, I seriously think Jacob is a very impressive and talented person, and he speaks for a lot of people in our party.
Right, gentleman there, then the lady there. See, I did see you.
Hello, Roger Hurst, Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner for this great county. Really welcome what you've said, been reported to say about investment in policing and law and order so far in the campaign. I suppose my question is really twofold. Just to make you aware, Essex has the lowest funding for policing of any county apart from Lincolnshire. Most of the funding currently flows to the great metropolitan forces. No, Suffolk's not less in terms of the funding per resident together. But the question really is, do you think what you've committed is enough? And can you correct the funding formula so it actually flows to forces which actually are solving these problems like we are here, rather than going to forces that are failing?
Well, Roger, first of all, congratulations on your great work, which I can sense from all the applause that you've been getting. I mentioned before that the social care cuts I thought had gone too far, and my second area of biggest concern is police numbers, and I think we see that in the knife crime. There was a delayed impact from cutting back police numbers. Didn't show in the crime figures for a while. Now it is, and we need to recognise that the biggest way to deter crime is to increase the likelihood that you're going to get caught, and so that is a commitment I make, that we will address the issue of police numbers. But I also want to be a Prime Minister who addresses the root causes of crime. And when I talked about illiteracy, one of the reasons that I want to eliminate young kids leaving our schools not able to read properly is I want to give them a better alternative to going into gangs. And so I think all parts of the state have to work together to make sure that we encourage people in the right direction when they leave school.
Right. No, the lady in front of you. No, the lady in front of you, please.
You go first, I'll follow.
Well, okay.
Good afternoon, Jeremy. Councillor Ron Ramis from Braintree District Council. The question is, what would you like your legacy to be if you become leader of our party?
Thank you. I always have a simple rule, which is that I think it doesn't matter whether you're popular when you do a job, it's what people say after you've gone that matters. And so I think I've shown in my political career that I'm prepared to take unpopular decisions if it's the right thing. And I think the NHS, we've got many, many more people using better, safer hospitals than when I arrived, and I'm proud of that, but it wasn't recognised at the time. So what do I want to be? I want to be the Prime Minister that led us out of the European Union and dealt with one of the biggest constitutional challenges that we've had in our history. I want to be the Prime Minister who set this country up for the future with an economy that is absolutely roaring, with thousands of young people able to do what I did when I was in my 20s and set up their own business. And then I gave you the third one, which is about illiteracy. I want us to really show that we are the party of opportunity for everyone by removing that barrier that handicaps so many people at the start of their lives. So those are big changes. They are not necessarily changes that you will see instantly. But if you look back on, I'm not comparing myself to Margaret Thatcher, but if you look back on that Thatcher government, you can see now that was totally transformative because of brave, bold decisions that were taken at the time. And that is the kind of leadership that I think we need as a country.
Right. Give it to the lady who I originally meant. Go on.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. I'm Angela from Chelmsford. I do agree social funding and care of our vulnerable people is a huge problem and a great strain on society. I'm just wondering how you will balance that with any younger people on 0 hours contracts, struggling to find rented accommodation, let alone to buy a property. I'm just wondering how you will balance that and how you will engage with them and get them on board the Conservative Party. I think you'll have an uphill job.
Thank you, Angela. It's very important. And how do you balance all these conflicting priorities? That's the question, isn't it? Yes. And all Conservatives, because we're decent people, want to find money for important public services like the police, and also want to cut taxes on people on low pay who are struggling to pay the rent and for whom the cost of living is a big issue. The only way you do that is to grow our economy. So if we increased our growth rate from 1.5% a year to the 3% that they have in America, that releases an extra £20 billion a year for public services or for tax cuts. So the Conservative answer to your question is to really fire up our economy as only Conservatives know how. And then when we're in the good position of being able to make those choices, and I know this because I took those hard decisions to put our economy on its feet. And probably the biggest thing I've done in my time in the Cabinet was to get that funding increase for the NHS. But that was partly because I pushed hard for it, but the main reason was because George Osborne took some very, very hard decisions in 2010 that turned our economy round. And I think that's an insight that only Conservatives have.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jeremy Hunt. Okay. We'll meet our second contender in just a moment, but Boris Johnson's campaign have kindly provided us with this video.
Nice to see you. Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Yes, of course you can. If I get in, we'll come out deal or no deal on October the 31st.
Good man.
We'll do that.
Thank you very much.
Would that make you come back and vote Conservative again?
Yes.
That's the spirit.
Yes.
But we've got to have the courage to tell the people of this country that we can do it if we really want to. And that's the only way, actually.
And you're the only person that can do that.
A lot of teachers are telling me that they feel that the funding per pupil isn't high enough. We need more police out there, but sometimes I think we need. And stop and search?
Yes.
Totally with you.
I'm scared. My daughter used to live in the road.
Yeah. Safe big city it was when I used to run it. I can tell you we got crime down by 20%. We got the murder rate down. But I also think we need to be supporting the wealth creators in the business sector, because otherwise you're not going to have the dosh to invest. Right. Cut some taxes and you'll get more money in. Would you normally think of yourself as a Conservative voter, would you say?
No.
No? Ever? Can I ask you a terrible question? Would you consider voting for me?
Yes.
If there is one lesson from that referendum of 2016, it is that too many people feel left behind, that they're not able to take part fully in the opportunities and success of our country. That's why now is the time to unite our society and unite our country, to build the infrastructure, to invest in education, to improve our environment and to support our fantastic NHS, to lift everyone in our country, and of course also to make sure that we support our wealth creators and the businesses that make that investment possible. Now is the time for us to believe in ourselves and what we can do. And that's why I am standing to be leader of the Conservative Party.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Boris Johnson.
Good evening, how are you? Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And thank you for giving up your time, your precious time on this Saturday evening as we come now to the penultimate hustings of this Conservative Party leadership contest. And I'm conscious of loads of people who think that our party faces electoral difficulties, if not electoral disaster. They're worried about the state of the polls, and I think it's probably true that we're on slightly over 20% or something like that. And it is also true that at the recent European Parliament elections we managed to score a staggering total of 8.8%, which is not brilliant. But I want to tell you tonight, my friends, that the hour is darkest before the dawn. And we're going to turn this thing round, and we are going to come back, and we are going to win. And here's how we do it. There are three things that we need to do, and the first and most important is to get Brexit done. Get Brexit over the line by October. Get Brexit over the line by October the 31st. And there are some very simple things that we need to do to ensure that that happens. And number one, we need to look after the European Union citizens here in our country, the 3.2 million. Their rights should be protected and passed into law. We should do that now. Put it into law in a supererogatory as soon as we can, in an ex gratia and supererogatory way. Just do it. We should have done it 3 years ago, don't you think? Look after them, absolutely. And number two, let's take that 39 billion, quite a large sum. I don't think the EU are necessarily expecting all that, and suspend it in a state of creative ambiguity above the talks until we get the answer that we need, and then we should get on and solve the problems of the Irish border, frictionless trade, all those issues where they logically belong. That's in the context of the free trade agreement that we're going to strike with our European Union friends and partners after we have left on October the 31st. Isn't that the commonsensical thing to do? It certainly is. And in the meantime, of course, we've got to get ready to come out without an agreement. We've absolutely got to do that. We're a great country, we can do it, can't we? We're a resilient, dynamic economy, the fifth biggest in the world. We can get ready to come out if we absolutely have to, and I don't want to, but if we absolutely have to come out on WTO terms. And I know that there are some people who prophesy that we can't do it and that that the planes won't fly. and that there won't be any clean drinking water in Malden or Colchester or wherever we are, in Essex. And they say that I heard the Department of Agriculture said that there was a risk that we wouldn't have sufficient supplies of glucose and milk solids and whey to make the the Mars bars on which our children depend. And I have to say, and then somebody at Tesco said that we wouldn't be able to provide Christmas dinner. I think, honestly, can we provide Christmas dinner by Christmas this year, including Brussels sprouts, if need be? We can. The planes will fly, and there will be clean drinking water, and there will be ample supplies of glucose and milk solids and whey to make the Mars bars, because where there's a will, there's a way. Ladies and gentlemen, you were braced for that one. And then we get on with delivering our modern conservative agenda. And what I want to do as our Prime Minister is to do, roughly speaking, what I did in London when I was mayor, and that's to unite the country, bring it together, level up with better education funding. More education funding for all our schools, levelling up. So primary schools reach 4,000, secondary schools reach 5,000, putting in better infrastructure as we did in London. We massively increased capacity on the tube, fighting crime, put 20,000 more police on the streets. We've cut the murder rate in London by 50%, radically reduced knife crime and other types of violence. That is what we need to do with this country. And I want to be the Prime Minister who does, for instance, for Northern Powerhouse Rail, what I did for Crossrail in London, and who does for the West Midlands, for connectivity in the West Midlands, where Andy Street has some fantastic ideas, what we did with the tube upgrades. And isn't it time we did something to improve the A12, my friends? I thought you might like that. And while I'm on that subject, of infrastructure, I think it is absolutely pathetic in this country that did so much to pioneer the internet and the World Wide Web. We have only 7% of households that have access to full fibre broadband. Come on, in Spain they have 90% access, and we should do it. No more manana attitude. Let's radically accelerate full fibre broadband. And people will say, well, how are we all going to pay for this infrastructure and this wonderful education that you want to improve and broadband? Actually, there is headroom. We can do it, and we should do it now. But I'll tell you something, the way we pay for it is the way we Conservatives always pay for great public infrastructure and great education and the great NHS. That's because we also understand and believe in the wealth-creating side of our economy. And we support the wealth creating, we support business. And we do what we can to alleviate the burdens on business and industry and entrepreneurs, because that is the way to generate the income that we're always going to need to pay for fantastic public services of all kinds. And that is at the heart of our One Nation modern conservative vision. And that is a compelling vision that we can sell to the electorate, and I believe win on that manifesto, because there is one group of people, or certainly one individual surrounded by a group of semi-Marxists who doesn't understand or believe in that agenda, and it's of course Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party. And they cannot be allowed anywhere near the government of this country, not just because they back Hamas and Hezbollah and they support the mullahs of Tehran in the dispute over the Persian Gulf rather than our friends in Washington. And it's worse than that, my friends. This is a guy, Corbyn and McDonnell, who would put up taxes on inheritance, on pensions, on corporation tax to the highest level in Europe. They'd raise income tax to 50p in the pound. They'd put a tax not just on homes, but on gardens, people of Essex and Eastleigh, the gardens. And I had to tell them that in Sevenoaks, and they'd have to change their name to Three Oaks, as a rather what Corbyn would do. We cannot allow him anywhere near the government of this country, and we won't, will we? We're going to win. We're going to win. And the way we do it, we deliver Brexit. We deliver Brexit, and we burst those two puffballs, the Brexit Party and the Liberal Democrats, sort of sprouting saprophytically on the sense of decay in trust in politics. We burst it, we get all those hundreds of thousands of good people back voting for us again, and then we wallop Jeremy Corbyn and his team for 6. And let me tell you, the last time I was called upon to defeat an emanation of the London Labour left, considerably wilier and more devious than Jeremy Corbyn, we beat him when our great party was 17 points behind Labour in London. We did it then, we can do it again. With your help, we will. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope I can count on your support. Thank you. How are you? This is the real hero of all this, by the way.
There's a lady there that is very keen for you to know that's the whole of Southend backs Boris.
Well, I wish it were true. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Right. We're going to do something a little bit different now, and I did the same with Jeremy earlier. I'm not going to ask you political questions. I'm going to ask you questions about values and character. What would you write in a letter to your 16-year-old self?
I think I would probably. Don't forget the advice of my grandmother, which was, darling, always remember, it's not how you're doing, it's what you're doing. Is what she used to say to me.
And how have you lived that out?
I think when I've done well in life, it's because I've been totally absorbed in something and totally committed and totally fascinated by what is the task ahead. And I think when I look at what we have to do now, I can see so many challenges for our country, but I can also see so many incredible opportunities. And I think, without wishing to drag it back to politics, but I do think that we have been so gloomy and so negative about ourselves in the last 3 years that there really is a massive opportunity now to turn things around and look at Britain's potential in a different way. Get Brexit done, unleash the opportunities of Brexit, and then look at the way in which this country is going to power ahead in the next 3 decades. So I think when I'm absorbed in something, I'm all right.
Pete.
It's when I get distracted.
People always think of politicians as very extrovert, confident people, but do you have moments of self-doubt? Do you suffer from imposter syndrome at all?
That's a really good question, because I think because psychologists do try and address this issue with people like me who find themselves in very big jobs. I remember somebody came in, because I did think when I became Mayor of London, I thought, I hardly, I'm going to be honest with you. When I became Mayor of London, I really wasn't entirely sure where everything was in London. And I did have a slight sense of apprehension that somebody was going to ask me, where is Hillingdon and where is Havering? Quickly. And this was a long time ago, obviously. I now know intimately. So I did have that slightly floaty feeling. But today, in all honesty, I think the truth is that I've been thinking about all this for such a long time, and I do have I feel a deep sense of responsibility about the situation that we're in. After all, I did campaign for Brexit. I was one of those who helped, perhaps with many in this room, I helped to get it over the line. I think that it's a bit of a shame that it's been in the doldrums for so long. I do see very clearly what I think needs to be done, and I'm very excited about it. So funnily enough, I feel less imposter syndrome now than I did 11 years ago when I was running for mayor.
When you were Foreign Secretary, you were sitting around the table with the likes of President Trump, President Xi, or whoever. Are there moments when you can't quite believe that you are there?
I can't quite believe that some of the other characters are there. Absolutely. I don't want to sound, look. Obviously, it is a great honour to be called upon to represent your country in any capacity, and I think anybody who goes to these. I see Vicky, who's in the European Parliament. We all, everybody who goes to represent our country abroad does feel a sense of pride, and you have to be. Yes, you do occasionally pinch yourself, but you just get on with it.
You have a great ability to make people laugh, but do you think that's also a disadvantage as well as an advantage?
No, I think it's absolutely vital. And I'll tell you why. Because if you can engage people's interest through any technique, whatever, you will get your message over. And what I think I noticed about people listen to what I say and they remember, perhaps they remember the gaffes as well. But I don't mind that, provided they also remember the simple messages that I tried to get over. And I think, what I want people to take away from tonight is that we need to deliver Brexit, unite the country, and defeat Corbyn, right? Those are the three messages. But I also hope that people will remember the way that we're going to beat Corbyn, and it's by getting back to solid, pragmatic, one nation, or modern conservatism where you believe in the market and fantastic public services. It's a winning formula, and I want us to focus on all that again, and to talk up. So that means talking up enterprise as well as public services. We haven't been doing enough of the first, in my view.
What's the main thing you've learned from a member of your family?
The main thing I've learned from a member of my family, boy. I mentioned my grandmother. Okay, I thought it was quite a good one. Okay, let me just think. I think, well, my mother taught me to draw and paint very badly. She was very good. No, she didn't teach me to make buses, but I came up with that myself. I don't know what floated into my head. But I have, it's perfectly true, and this is, okay, so you really want to go to this sort of psycho stuff. I do love making things with my hands, rather than my feet, obviously. And I've always liked doing that since I was a child. And I suppose my mother encouraged me to do that. She's much more gifted than I am. But there you go.
What makes you angry, and do you have a temper?
Very, very few things make me angry, with the possible exception of being defeated at tennis by my sister. That's probably the only thing I would. But and even then, I don't really get very angry. I don't think. I've become much more. I don't know whether anyone else has noticed it. I'm much more. I wouldn't say placid or tranquil, but I don't tend to blow my top. I can't think of the last time I did, in fact.
Okay. What's the... See, if I was Andrew Neil, I would now push you on that, wouldn't I? But I'm not going to.
No, you can.
All right, okay, all right, then I'll push you.
Yes.
When was the last moment you lost your temper, then?
Well, I don't think I don't, oh, God.
Was it when the audience booed me in Birmingham?
No. No, sorry, they booed you or booed me?
Yeah, you were losing your temper on my behalf.
Yes, no, that's right. Well, I thought it was, they didn't really boo you, though.
No, they did, yeah.
No, they didn't. No.
Anyway,
I was on your side then, and continue to be on your side. This guy's been a total hero, by the way. I don't want to sound sort of as I'm sucking up to Ian, but he's done an amazing job of keeping this whole show.
Well, it's amazing that you and Jeremy and I are still on talking terms after 9 of these.
Yes, I know. I'm dreading
the last one where I issue the coup de grace. What's been the best moment of your life so far?
Oh boy. Well, that would unfortunately fall into the category of talking about my family and loved ones, which I've cunningly demarcated for the last 30 years as being off limits. But it would be in that general area.
Apart from that?
Apart from that, that's most of them, isn't it? Well, best, I suppose. I think the moment of greatest relief was probably when the Olympic Games were over, and the Olympic and Paralympic Games were over, and we hadn't stuffed it up. I think that was
that was the limit of your ambition, was it?
Yeah, no, we palpably hadn't stuffed it up, and that was, every day we were waking up in a cold sweat. And by the way, it was, thinking about events that are going to happen over the next 3 months and uncertainties about that. This country we can deliver all sorts of amazing things, even if difficulties take place. And London, which is not far away, went through all sorts of we had riots, we've had strikes, we had heaven knows what. And the Olympics was basically a sort of, the 3 weeks running up to the Olympics were a sort of glorified fiasco, actually. Nobody really noticed. And because everybody had become so optimistic and so confident. And so that was the moment of greatest relief.
It was all right on the night.
Well, it wasn't actually, but I mean, nobody noticed.
Right, should we go to...
It rained.
We'll take you off the psychiatrist's couch now.
Thank you very much.
Let's go to some questions. Let's start off with the gentleman over there. And then, gentleman, have you asked a question before? You haven't, right? Don't put your hand up if you asked a question before, because I want to get new people.
Thank you. Boris, it's Chris Hossack from the Brentwood-Ongar constituency. Your predecessor talks a lot about using entrepreneurialism to drive the economy forward. Yeah. I want to mention a company that I started my career in. This is a well-known company in Essex called Fold Motor Company. And when I joined it, we manufactured vehicles all over the UK. So I'm listening to entrepreneurialism, but what I want to know is what could you do to bring back big industry, manufacturing, blue chip companies to this area that actually are not just where people are creating their own jobs, but actually there's great employment opportunities as well.
Thank you. And I do think there are huge opportunities. The motor manufacturing sector is going through tough times at the moment, and partly that's because of the whole diesel problem, and also because of, basically the internal combustion engine, we've got to face it, is going to start in the next 20 years to come towards the end of its cycle. And we are going to be buying many more EVs and electric vehicles, and that is the future. And we should be incredibly excited. You saw the massive JLR investment, a £1 billion factory they're going to put investment they're putting in the West Midlands again. That is the way forward. We should be getting behind new technology, battery technology in particular. And one of the most exciting things about the campaign that Jeremy and I have just been doing, going around the country, is you see the real changes, things are actually happening. And the West Midlands again is the home of an industrial revolution, but this time it's in clean, green technology. And that's where I think we should be going. So if I'm lucky enough to succeed in this contest, I want to see us getting full square as a government behind that type of high value, high skill, clean, green motor manufacturing technology. That's the future for the motor manufacturing industry in this country. We should support it 1,000%.
Okay. Gentleman there, and then we'll go to the lady over there.
Neil Weston from Suffolk. My kids have gone through university and come out with big debts. What's a fair tuition fee?
Well, thank you very much. I think one of the troubles with the whole tuition fee thing was that when we set it up, we thought that there would be a market, and we thought that some universities would offer different prices for different courses, and that actually, of course, all the universities charge top dollar for everything. Because they didn't want to think of themselves as in any way offering something inferior to the next university. You can understand the psychology of that. The result is students do have huge debts. I think the answer is to look at the interest rate that students are paying, and I'll make and that should be coming down. It's too high. I'll make a further suggestion, and I'm going to develop this idea if I'm lucky enough to get it. I think that the maintenance, the costs of living for students and the debts they thereby accumulate are also horrendous, and particularly for poorer families. And we must be doing more to help them. And so, there used to be a system of scholarships to help kids with the costs of their maintenance and their living. I want to bring that back as well. So, but the biggest issue for kids coming out of university is not just the oppression of their debt, but the cost of housing, and that is a very difficult one, and we Tories have to solve it without building all over the green belt. And that's a big challenge for our generation.
Okay, lady there, then the lady here.
Hi Boris, Nikki from Malden.
Hello.
I know you don't want to leave with no deal, but you say you will. So I'd be interested to know, if we did leave with no deal come 1st of November, your response in 3 areas. So firstly, the Irish border. Secondly, integrated manufacturing like cars. And then thirdly, the type of trade deal that you would then negotiate. So waking up on the 1st of November, what would you do?
Thank you very much. Well, Vicky, first of all, on the Irish border, the most important thing is that both sides, whether all three, so the UK, Dublin and the Commission, are all committed to having no hard border in Northern Ireland. That's agreed. And it's not technically necessary to have anything of the kind. We will be able to have checks for rules of origin or phytosanitary checks or whatever away from the border in Northern Ireland. That's the most important thing. And of course, I think we will have to do a deal that really works with Dublin to get this right. And I think that the incoming Prime Minister, and if I'm lucky enough to get it, will have to spend a lot of time and care and thought working with our friends in Dublin to get this right. Number two, on the supply chains and manufacturing, there is a huge amount that's already been done, and the situation has been greatly improved. And I'm confident that we will be ready on the 31st. But I stress we don't want to come out, the 31st of October. We don't want to come out with no deal, and that's why it's so vital that we prepare for it and we get ready, because it's only by getting ready for a no deal outcome that you can be convincing with our European friends about what we're capable of achieving. And it's under those circumstances that they'll give us the standstill or the protraction of the existing arrangements that we need. And then we do, to come to your third point, it's in that context that we do the free trade deal. And it should be broadly a deal on what they call Super Canada lines. It should be a big, all singing, all dancing free trade deal. But that should only be the kernel at the heart of a big new partnership between the UK and the EU. I think one of the problems with our approach in the last 3 years is we've been both too defeatist about the negotiations, but also not positive enough about our European friends. You know, it's so sad that our kids don't learn German or French anymore in the way that my generation did, let alone Spanish or Italian. We need to be encouraging exchanges. We need to be encouraging the teaching of European languages, and that's what that's a really pro-European thing to do. We should get back to that and rebuild those partnerships.
Are you worried that in the event of no deal, that British exporters in particular aren't ready, that apparently only half of them have signed up to the necessary government websites and paperwork and all the rest of it?
Well, no, actually, Ian, it's a brilliant question. But actually, of the 147,000 SMEs that trade export only to the rest of the EU and nowhere else, only about a third have so far, I think, got the right customs forms and done what they need to do. Well, why? I think everybody knows why. It's because for 3 years we've had a government that's been saying that no deal or parts of a government, I should say, because it's been confused. We've had some people saying that no deal is so disastrous and abhorrent that businesses have concluded there's no reason to prepare for it, and that's been the problem. We need to be much more can-do about this, and of course the truth is that the better we prepare now, the smoother any no-deal Brexit will ultimately be. And that's why we've got to get ready. And by the way, the preparations that we make now, even if we get a protraction, even if we get an extension, which I hope, the preparations we make now for no deal will not be wasted, because in any event, we will need to be making changes and adjustments for the moment when we finally do come out of the customs union arrangements and out of alignment with the single market. And when we finally do the free trade deal, we will need to have made these changes anyway. And so preparation between now and October the 31st will certainly not be wasted.
When you say get the extension that we hope, what do you mean by that? You're not talking about extending Article 50, are you?
No. So what we come out of the EU on October the 31st, and then we have a standstill in the existing so you have a zero tariff, zero quota arrangement, so that business doesn't have the threat of immediate disruption.
They have to agree to that, though, don't they?
Well, they do.
And what if they don't?
Well, that's it, and then you have a no-deal Brexit, but we'll be ready for it.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Have you got the microphone?
Yes.
Oh, well,
Yes.
it wasn't actually you, madam, but go ahead and then we'll have you next. We'll have you...
All right. Good evening, Boris. I'm Linda Cross from Bury St Edmunds. And my question is this. In light of ever-increasing mental health issues in young adults and children, what plans do you have to ban all gambling advertising in the UK?
Right. Well, thank you very much. That is a new one. I think that one of the things that we're looking at are ways of making the internet giants more responsible for the social harms that they may be encouraging with their on the internet, and that I think particularly affects young people and the mental health of young people. So we're looking at that. I think that there is also a case, given the extent of mental health problems and the way attitudes are changing in society towards mental health, and we must be much more open in talking about it. I think there is a case for giving companies more efficient tax arrangements to look after employees who have mental health problems. And I think that would be massively to the productive benefit of the UK economy. But young people, I was shocked in my constituency the other day to see a huge file of young people with mental health problems who are presenting themselves to social services, and we've got to address this issue. And a lot of it, I think, is driven by the internet and a sense that other people have things that they can't have, and that they're being judged, and all this kind of thing. But it needs to be addressed.
Well, obviously, a complete ban would be a very difficult thing to do.
On the internet, on advertising for...
But yeah. We saw with the fixed odds betting terminal saga that the Treasury moved heaven and earth to try and stop Tracy Crouch at the DCMS banning those or reducing the bets to £2. The Treasury get huge amounts of money from gambling, don't they? That's the issue.
Well, that is the issue. I mean, I think I don't like problem gambling. I don't think people should be encouraged to gamble. But it is also the case that William Hill and other companies have laid off quite a few jobs. I think about 7,000 jobs have gone. So there are consequences when you interfere in that way. But obviously we have to wean people off gambling. I will look at what you say about the effects of advertising on young people in particular.
Right, lady here, and then gentleman right at the back.
Hello, hi. It's Anne Kingston-Lewis, also from Bury St Edmunds. Sorry to revert back to Brexit, but my question relates to the question before last. And is it not right? Okay, sorry. Can you guarantee, Mr. Johnson, that if you were elected, you would immediately, absolutely immediately, start making strong preparation for a WTO Brexit? And which areas do you think should take priority? And there's another question related to that. The side deals that have apparently been agreed in the past, which would sort of maybe smooth our exit if we were to go out without the withdrawal agreement. These side deals, does the EU have to agree to them, even if we leave without a deal? Well, that's what it's for. And is it possible that you can see that we could make many more of these side deals?
Thank you so much. Well, listen, on the side deals, a lot of them actually are very far down the track. So on aviation and financial services, many other areas, a huge amount of work has been done mutually between us and the EU. The areas I would want to focus on, particularly from July the 24th onwards, or 23rd, or whatever it's going to be, onwards, would be the chains of authority in Northern Ireland, which we must get straight. Everyone's got to understand how to deal with a no-deal Brexit there. There are issues that still need to be resolved. It would be helpful if Stormont was back. I think the agricultural sector also needs some work on it, and we need to make sure that we have plans in place for whatever it's going to be, whether it's export refunds or deficiency payments or farm gate. You're going to need things ready to support the farming sector if we come out on no deal, and that is another key area of focus for us.
Right, gentleman at the back, and then gentleman here.
Good evening, thank you, Ian. Hello, Boris. My name's Andrew, I come from Braintree, and my question is on the 14 million disabled people who are supported by approximately 7 million unpaid carers, which saves £139 billion off the NHS for a mere £60-odd a week. Wow. So I'm looking for, we hear about the great things we do abroad and the aid budget, but what about looking towards the disabled, and especially for myself, it's autism, and with the right support, we can achieve anything with the right team, can't we? So I managed to get onto district council, and I'm one of the few known autistic district councillors in the country, and thanks to the support of the party, the county council, the great MPs that we've got, that is one mega team, and I'd look to the party to see if they can support us, both the disabled and the unpaid carers in the country going forward. Thank you.
Hooray. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And listen, and you know, thank you very much for what you do for our party and for the amazing example that you've set. And I think it's inspirational. That a story like yours would not often have been heard 10, certainly not 20 years ago. So keep going. And I think that it's about a change of attitude as much as anything else. This whole thing, yes, of course, we need to be putting more money into social care and adult social care, all that stuff. I totally agree with that. But it's also about recognizing that everybody has potential that is capable of being unleashed. And I think if we Tories are preeminently the party that understands that and wants to help people to make the best of their talents. And so that is what we should be doing.
Right, gentleman there, followed by lady there in the third row in white. Yes, you.
Hi Boris, it's Adam Rowe from Braintree. Both yourself and your opponent have pledged education to be one of your main priorities. As a head of department in a school, I think the biggest problem is recruitment and retention of really good teachers. And I think to solve some of the problems that yourself and Jeremy Hunt have talked about, before we do that, we need to solve that recruitment and retention problem through tackling workload. And I just wondered what you would do to solve that problem.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for what you're doing. I do think that what I'm proposing, another a big increase in the per pupil fund, would obviously help schools to pay good teachers more and also to employ more, and therefore to reduce your workload. That would be my hope and my expectation. I might also say, and I hope this is, I got in terrible trouble for saying this the other day, but I think in addition to trying to take people on modest incomes out of tax and lifting tax thresholds, it's not a bad thing either for Conservatives to be thinking about how we can reduce the tax burden on people who are maybe heads of maths departments in our schools or senior nurses or whatever who are being captured by the higher rate of taxation. It seems to be not an unreasonable thing for Conservatives to be thinking about, and how to help you in that respect as well.
Right, the lady there. Let's go right to the back, sir. Yep, you.
Hello, Boris. I love you dearly. I have to say that. You're absolutely fabulous.
I sense a butt cut.
I'm Yvonne Bailey, and I'm from Harwich. The question, I've got a few questions, but I think the main one I want to ask you is about drugs. Drug dealing. County lines.
Yes, county lines.
We've got a real problem with that. And that goes across. We've talked about education, we've talked about our children, we've talked about schools and what they can do. My daughter is a teacher in Sudbury. They have problems with youngsters coming out of London and standing outside the schools and dealing drugs. And the teachers are in despair. They don't know what to do. What are we going to do to solve that problem?
It's terrible. Well, look, I think... thank you. And it's been... The county lines drugs gangs are really, for me, quite a recent phenomenon. I mean, they weren't around. It didn't seem to be such a disaster when I was running London. It seems to have grown in just in the last few years. These are what we need to round up the key gang nominals, the people who are using these poor kids as mules, as couriers, ruining their lives, getting them into debt, covering them with all sorts of bogus obligations, terrifying them, and we need to be coming down very, very hard on those bosses. And jailing them. Secondly, we need to look at the actual what it's producing. The county lines turf wars are producing terrible epidemic of gang crime and knife crime in the UK. And I do think that one way to tackle that is to empower the police more to take the knives and the guns off the streets. And we did that in London. We did that in London with a lot of success. As I said earlier, we told the police they could do stop and search again in a way that was very, very, it's a very emotionally challenging thing, stop and search, both for the person who's asked to give up a knife and for the police officer who's asked to do it. But we told the police, we're going to look after you, we'll give you the legal protection, we'll give you political support when you do this. And that's very, very important. And they did. They took about 11,000 knives off the streets of London in just over a year. And serious youth violence went down 32%. And as I said, the murder rate went down 50%. And we held it right down for 4 or 5 years with that kind of a mixture of tough policing, but a lot of engagement also with the kids, giving them stuff to do, diversions of many, many kinds, but above all, employment. I mean, the prospect of a good job, which is what we Conservatives offer. Our programme is for good jobs with higher wages and lower taxes. That's what we're offering these kids, as well as the stick, as it were, of tough policing. But tough policing has got to be a part of it.
Right, gentleman at the back there, and then we'll go over there, guy in the glasses, yeah.
Good afternoon, John DeVries from Chelmsford. I'm a retired police officer. I've spent 35 years in the service of Essex Police. I welcome the fact that you've announced these 20,000 extra police officers, but the fact of the matter is that that's little more than redressing the losses in recent years, mainly under our watch. And one of the things I note is when I joined the police 35 years ago, just about every police officer was a Tory supporter. Nowadays, it's anything but Tory, and that's an absolute shame. We have got to show that our government supports, trusts and respects our police. At the moment, we're treated like naughty little children that need to be controlled and regulated to extinction. So what will you do to show that the Conservative Party does trust and respect the police and return us to being the party of law and order?
Well, thank you. I think... Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for everything, and you're completely right. And I don't want to sound boastful about this, but I think when I was running London, I had probably, I reckon I had the support of most of the 52,000 men and women of the Metropolitan Police Service. Because I believe in wrapping. If you're the leader of a great public service, and as a mayor, I was, because I was effectively the Commissioner for Crime, as well as running transport and loads of other things. You have to realise that you're not there as the chief consumer of that service. You're not that. Yes, you're partly there to represent the public to the police, but you're also there to champion the public servants you represent and to look after their interests. And that's why, when it comes to backing the police, when you ask them to do difficult things, to go towards danger, to take knives off the kids in London, you should back them up. And so one of the things we want to do, for instance, is to change the rules on stop and search. So it's no longer a senior officer, an inspector can decide whether or not Section 60 can be invoked, and to make sure that an officer can decide that a crime may be committed, not that a crime will be committed. Just to give the protections of the law back to officers and to give them that sense of reassurance, and that fundamentally society and the politicians are on their side. Because if we aren't, you're completely right, if we Conservatives can't recover as the party of law and order, it will take us a very long time to recover altogether. But we can, and we'll do it very fast.
Okay.
My name is George Jabour. As an immigrant from Syria, I completely agree with your suggestion that immigrants should learn English. Actually, my way to integrate in the UK has been to travel to every region of the country and fight unwinnable seats for our great party, most recently as mayor for Mansfield. So my question is, how would you reform the system to ensure that we prioritize highly skilled migrants who are willing to integrate in our society?
Oh, well, thank you so much. And can I thank you for what you're doing for our party. It's wonderful, and keep going. If I'm lucky enough to be elected, I will try and help you wherever you are. I don't think I could get elected in Damascus South. But if you could, please continue, and we will help you. And thank you for what you're doing. I think that, look, I'm the proud descendant of Turkish immigrants myself, and our great country has benefited massively from being welcoming to people of talent, such as yourself, and we must continue to be so. But we must do so in a way that is controlled, and that was partly what the Brexit vote was about. It wasn't that we wanted to be in any way adverse to people of talent coming to this country. We know how much our economy has benefited from talented people coming to the UK. We need an Australian-style points-based system, so that we can. So for every sector, and so when it comes to farming, and I don't know, we passed Tiptree, didn't we? There must be I bet they get some fruit pickers from around the rest of the. I wouldn't be at all surprised. I've no idea actually, but they do. Will Quince, they do, and so we must ensure that we have a commonsensical system that enables seasonal workers and indeed full all year round workers to come to this country without too much hassle. We have a wonderful thing called the internet, which will have full fibre broadband too. If they can identify a job and they satisfy the criteria for the sector, then they should, in my view, they should come and we should help them. But it's got to be democratically controlled, and people like me have got to be able to explain to everybody the basis on which it is happening. And the problem with the previous system, or the system that will now be phased out or replaced, is that it basically gave 580 million people the perfect right to come to this country in any way that they wanted, and of course that was a beautiful idea, but it just placed unacceptable strains on the numbers, and we had to do something about it. So an Australian-style points-based system is the way forward.
I've been asked to plug the London hustings, the final hustings of the 16, which is on Wednesday evening at 7:30. Where's Tom? Am I allowed to say the venue? Okay, well, it's at the Excel Centre, so easy for you to get to from this side of London. If you can't get there, we will be broadcasting it live on LBC from 7:30. I wish we had more time.
Are you broadcasting it live on LBC?
Yes.
Not on the TV?
Not on the TV. Well, it might be, I don't know, but I don't control the TV. But, Are you looking forward to the London one? Because it'll be a big one.
Yes, I will. Rather like as I look forward to the end of the Olympics. I think, provided I can get through to it without stuffing it up. That's
Ladies and gentlemen, Boris Johnson. Let me do something that I've done at the last two hustings and ask you to put your hands up if you came into this barn, today undecided about who you were going to vote for. Okay, put your hands down. Put your hands up if you've now decided. Most of you. Mission accomplished. Thank you very much.